How do you know if you're in a calorie deficit or not when you are on your health and fat loss expedition? Because let's be real and call a spade here. Fat loss doesn't take place if you eat some fat loss gummies. It also doesn't take place just by you cutting out carbohydrates. The only way that fat loss takes place is when you are in a calorie deficit. Therefore, it is fundamental that if your goal is fat loss, that you be in a consistent calorie deficit. And that is why I'm going to answer that question today. How do you know if you are really in a calorie deficit or not? On that note, welcome to this episode of the Mandy Mayer podcast. As per usual, this is the podcast where we chat all about your health and fat loss, and also all about how you can achieve your goals on your health and fat loss expedition. Now, I want to say you get three types of people when it comes to tracking calories. There are probably more, but let's focus on these three types of people so that I can discuss solutions for each type so that a calorie deficit can be created. But before we get into that, remember my next 4-week challenge is starting on the 8th of September and enrollment opens on the 4th of September. My last 4-week challenge sold out within 2 days. So don't wait on it. As soon as the 4th of September comes around, head to my website. The link is in the description and sign up to reserve your spot. Now, when it comes to your calories and you being within a calorie deficit, it is going to take some trial and error before you hit that sweet spot. And what I mean by trial and error is that you may need to tweak your calories until you get to the point where you're like, this is the calorie deficit you have been looking for. If you are currently on your health and fat loss expedition and you are seeing consistent progress, not only progress on that number on the scale, but also a shift in your body composition and also clothes that are fitting better, well, that means there is progress, and that means that you are most likely in a calorie deficit. Please keep in mind that even if you are in a calorie deficit, that number on the scale might still fluctuate, but over time you should see a downward shift within your weight. Now, if you are not seeing any shift on that scale or any shift within your body composition after 3 or 4 weeks of you being on your health and fat loss expedition, that might very well mean that you are not within a calorie deficit. Now, this is where I'm going to chat about the 3 different types of people when it comes to tracking calories. Number 1, this is a person that tracks absolutely everything down to the T for 7 days a week. And they do this consistently week upon week upon week. If this is you, you are going to have to look at the accuracy of your login. You are also going to have to look at the accuracy of the measuring of your foods. Because sometimes your calorie data, the data that you have been logging, might reflect that you are within a calorie deficit, but meanwhile back at the ranch, there has been a slight inaccuracy within the login and the measuring, which could ultimately push you out of a calorie deficit. Or it could just be that you are not in a calorie deficit. So maybe 1,600 calories, which is just an example, is not your calorie deficit amount. Maybe you might need to drop your calories by 100 calories down to 1,500 calories per day, and that might see you being within a calorie deficit. Again, it's all about trial and error and tweaking your calories until you hit that sweet spot. But the first thing I would have a look at is, are you tracking foods? And then secondly, the accuracy of your tracking. Now, most likely this is happening without you even knowing. And again, what you might need to do here is just drop your calories by 100 calories per day to make up for that slight inaccuracy of login. Now, let's say, for example, you have dropped your calories by 100 per day and you are still not seeing any results. Then maybe drop it by 50 or another 100 per day and check if that brings you results. But remember, your tracking has to be super consistent so that you can remove any of the guesswork and not just drop your calories, drop your calories, drop your calories. The second type of tracker that we get is the tracker who does it very loosely. And what I mean by this is it might be someone who tracks for 5 days out of the 7 days. Or it might be you that is only tracking during the week and then you forget about it on the weekend. To know if you are actually within a calorie deficit or not, if that is your type of tracking, it is going to be very difficult because there's 3 or 4 days that aren't accounted for. And a lot of the time, it's this type of person number 2, and I'm not pointing any fingers here, that will say things like, I'm doing everything according to plan, I'm tracking my calories, but I'm just not losing weight. But then meanwhile, back at the tracking ranch or the fat loss ranch, there is no accountability for what you have eaten on the weekend. Now, you cannot say to me, I am in a calorie deficit or I am not in a calorie deficit for certain if you don't have that data. So if you fit into the type 2 kind of category, instead of drastically dropping your calories if you don't see a shift on the scale, and instead of panicking because, oh, I don't know what to do, start by actually logging and tracking all your foods for 7 days, 14 days, without skipping a day and without skipping those 5 or 6 rusks over a couple of days, so that you have actual data to go on. Then you can see whether you are actually in a calorie deficit or not. Then once you have 2 or 3 or 4 weeks worth of data, you can make a decision as to, oh, you need to drop calories because there's no progress or shift on the scale or on your body composition. Or what you might find is that there will be visible progress because now you've been holding yourself accountable to actually logging and tracking everything that you are eating and drinking. Remember I said finding your calorie deficit or finding your sweet spot when it comes to your calorie deficit is all about trial and error. It's about making changes. It's about tweaking your calories until you get to that sweet spot. Now, if you type 1 person that tracks everything down to the T, it does become a little bit easier to make tweaks and changes because you have the data. But if you fall into the type 2 category where you track your calories loosely, you might have a calorie goal of 1,600 calories per day as your deficit goal. And you might think that you are sticking to 1,600 calories per day, but you're not accounting for the weekend calories, which are more often than not the calories that push you out of a deficit. So instead of dropping your calories from 1,600 to 1,500, first start accounting for every single little thing that you are eating and drinking before you decide to tweak your calories. Because most likely what you will find is that you don't need to tweak your calories, you just need to improve your logging and your tracking, or actually the consistency thereof. And then type number 3 are the people that don't actively log and track their calories. One thing I will say here is that you don't have to log and track your calories for fat loss to take place. Logging and tracking of calories is just a tool in your fat loss toolbox. And yes, it does help remove the guesswork and it does help give you structure and it does help you make more calculated choices when it comes to your nutrition and it comes to your calories. But again, you don't have to log and track calories for fat loss to take place. Now, let's say you aren't logging and tracking your calories and now you want to know whether you are in a calorie deficit or not. Again, if for 3 or 4 weeks you have been on your health and fat loss expedition and you've seen no progress whatsoever, you can assume that you are not within a calorie deficit. Now, this can be the tricky part because you don't have data to go back to say, okay, just drop the calories by 100 per day. Do that for a week and then reassess as to whether you need to drop the calories even more or not. So what I would suggest that you do here, if you are not logging and tracking your calories, is to at least have a food diary. So write down what you have for breakfast, write down what you're having for a snack, write down what you're having for lunch, etc., etc. So now if you don't see any progress over a couple of weeks, you can go back to your food diary that you've written out, and then you can look at where you can possibly make a reduction in the foods that you are eating or the portion sizes that you are having. Are you having 4 cups of tea with milk per day? Maybe you can have 3 cups of tea or 2 cups of tea. By doing that, you are reducing the amount of milk you are having, meaning you are reducing the amount of calories you are having. If you are snacking 2 or 3 times throughout the day, maybe you can reduce that to 1 or 2 times throughout the day. If you're having 3 Wheat Pix blocks with your breakfast, maybe you can look at having 2 Wheat Pix blocks with your breakfast. So ultimately, at the end of the day, what you'll be doing is reducing the amount of food that you are consuming to hopefully place you within a calorie deficit. Again, something as small as keeping a food diary of what you eat and drink on a daily basis can be super beneficial when it comes to you having to make tweaks and changes to your plan. The answer that many people don't want to hear is if you are not losing weight, or you are not seeing a shift within your body composition, or you are not seeing any progress, then the harsh reality of it is that you are not within a calorie deficit. Like I said at the start of this podcast episode, the only way for fat loss to take place is if you are within a calorie deficit. So if you've been doing this for 4 weeks and there is no shift, there are no changes, there is no progress, then it is safe to assume that you are not in a calorie deficit. That's where number one, you would either need to look at just tweaking your calories. And my suggestion would be to drop it by 100 calories per day as a calorie goal. Don't go big to start off with. But number two, if you have been tracking loosely, don't drop your calories immediately, but first start focusing on logging consistently to see if that brings about actual fat loss results. And if it doesn't, then you can look at starting to drop your calories by 100 calories per day. And if a 100 calorie drop per day does not bring about a shift or bring about results, then you can drop it by another 50 or another 100 calories per day to see if that actually takes you down to being within a calorie deficit. And as mentioned, if you aren't logging and tracking calories, please try and keep some sort of food logs for yourself so that when it comes to tweaking your food choices, you can actually do it based on the data that you have and not based on guesswork. And like I've mentioned, oftentimes you might think that you are in a calorie deficit or even try and convince yourself that you are in a calorie deficit. This is where you need to sit down and have an open, honest conversation with yourself and ask yourself, am I eating as little as I think I am? Are you logging and tracking all the foods and drinks that you consume? And are you logging and tracking every single day and not only on the days that suit you? Because once you figure that out, you can make the necessary changes needed to actually place you within a calorie deficit. Now, if you need some calorie controlled meals and recipes and ideas, I do have a recipe ebook that's got 42 calorie controlled meals in it. And these are all meals that I ate on my health and fat loss expedition, as well as meals that I eat now whilst I am maintaining my 40 kilogram fat loss. Please note that if you do decide to join the 4-week challenge, you will get the recipe ebook free of charge. On that note, I'm going to love and leave you like I usually do. Keep smiling, keep laughing, and keep being kind to one another. Much love, your friend who likes calling a spade, Mandy.